Hi, welcome everyone. Good afternoon. I'm just thrilled to see so many of you here, and I'm loving seeing all the connections. Building connections and relationships is just critical to the work that we do. So, thank you for what you do every day in your life and for also reaching out and building a bridge with us and others. So, welcome to everyone. My name is Michelle Richards. I'm the program director here at Immaculate Heart. And I'm just thrilled to be able to share with you information today about our ongoing events and opportunities. So, first of all, a little housekeeping. Restrooms are right through the double door that you entered, and you'll see a sign, and it's on your left. We will be really mindful of the time. We want to make sure that we respect your time, and so we will conclude at 1:30. There'll be time for questions and answers. Couple of other things. I want to call out our friends on Zoom who also are here. So there's another dozen people or so who are with us today, and thank you so much for supporting us today. There are a couple things on your table. So we have a lot of events coming up, and we have handouts at the welcome table. You can find out the most exciting thing is tomorrow at 12 o'clock downtown at LA Live. We have a slate of social justice films that we'll be screening. Please, if you'd like to come, we'll give you passes. You can pick them up on your way out. There are QR codes and surveys on your table. So after the program, please take a minute to reflect. And if there are suggestions that you have, you can just scan the QR code, fill it out online. Or if you'd like to write it out, please do. We really want your input so we can always improve. Wanted to tell you that August 1st, we have an event at the Peace Awareness Labyrinth in West Adams on Adams. And that's a day of information on cultural humility and meditation. So there's information about that in the back. And our next Lunch and Learn is August 16th, where we'll welcome Rabbi Heather Miller, who will talk about the ethics of money. So if you're not on our mailing list, please sign up. It's very easy to do. We have lovely Karita Kent bookmarks in the back. Scan the code and you're our friend for life. And now I want to ask Sherry to come up and do a welcome and an introduction. And thanks again, everybody, for being here. That's okay. That's okay.
Thank you, Michelle. Welcome, everybody. We'd love to see all the returning faces for Lunch and Learn. There's a lot of you here today, but there's a lot of new people. So let me see who's the new people who haven't been here before. Raise your hands high. Great, 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 great. So now that you know we're doing these Lunch and Learns on Fridays once a month, please come back and check out our website. There are also Immaculate community members here, so let's raise your hands, please. So thank you for coming, and I know there's more on Zoom. So one of the things we like to encourage when you come is to please mingle, get to know each other, because we're all doing the same kind of social justice work, God's work, and we want to be helping each other as we go through that. I always like to give a little infomercial about the Immaculate Heart community in case you're new to us, you don't know who we are. You might guess from our name that we have our roots in a Catholic order of nuns that started in Spain in the 1850s. That changed in 1970 when we became a lay community, a community without walls. We are Christian-based, inclusive, ecumenical. We have men, women, gay, straight, married, single. We live all over the United States. We have members in Canada and an incoming member from England. We accept new members annually. And if you have an interest in membership, please let us know. Check out our website for upcoming events and more about our history. So one of the objectives that we have for the Lunch and Learn series is to implement our goal statement, which calls for us to build relations in society which foster access for all persons to truth, dignity, and full human development, and to strategically change practices and situations which impede such access. So by having you here today, meeting with people on a regular basis, that's how we begin to form those relationships and partnerships with all of you. So thank you for being here. We also anchor our justice and social justice work in a three-step process. First of all, we educate ourselves on the issues so we know what we're dealing with. That's what we're doing today. Our second step is prayer. Our members hold our issues in prayer, and we ask you to do the same thing within your own faith tradition. And the third thing we do is we call for action. We believe in putting our faith into action. So at the Lunch and Learns, what we ask you to do is to act based on what you are hearing today. So listen for one or two things that you might be able to do, no matter how small, to make a difference, to raise awareness, or to advance the issue of people who are unhoused. So today we are going to be hearing about an organization called Housing Works. And we have some bragging rights about Housing Works because the Immaculate Heart community founded it in 2023. And the member who founded is Mary Kirchin, and she's here today. And I'm going to embarrass her and ask her to please stand up. Mary, where are you? Where are you? Oh, she's up there. Okay. There you are. Okay. Thank you, Mary. So this is a big legacy of our community, and there were, I think, 5 other Immaculate Art community members who in 2003, that was a long time ago, recognized that there's a need for affordable housing in Los Angeles. Imagine that. What's that, 21 years ago? Still have work to do, don't we? So Housing Works, as I understand, has become a model of service for the most vulnerable among the population of people who are unhoused, the chronically unhoused, seriously mentally ill, and those who have co-occurring addictions. And when I think of Housing Works, I think of 2 sayings that they have: housing first, and whatever it takes for as long as it takes. So works means that housing work does not wait for somebody to get off drugs or cure their mental illness before they put them in housing. They understand that people need to have a stable living environment before they can tackle those issues that have forced them to the streets. Whatever it takes for as long as it takes, and they mean that. By doing whatever it takes for as long as it takes, Housing Works serves the hardest to serve with the goal of their becoming permanently housed. So the staff at Housing Works does not sit behind a desk and wait for people to come to them. They are on the streets working with people who are unhoused every day. And once they are successful in placing them in housing, they surround people with the support that they need to stabilize their lives and to live successfully indoors. So our speaker today is Celina Alvarez, who's the executive director of Housing Works. And I don't think I have ever met anybody who is as passionate and articulate about her work with people who are unhoused than Celina. She's the real deal. Yes, you can clap. And in this Lunch and Learn series, the IHC likes to spotlight the heroes and sheroes among us who are doing the work, making a difference, and leading with compassion and love. And Celina, we lift you up. We celebrate your vital work with people who are unhoused. Thank you for making the time for being here today. So please join me in welcoming Celina Alvarez, our shero of today.
Thank you, Sherry. Can you hear me? Yes, I can hear myself. Well, thank you for that beautiful introduction. And really, Housing Works is not about me. It's about the people we serve, and it's also about the amazing staff who show up day in and day out to do the work. And so I'm thrilled that we have a handful of staff here today. So I'd like for you to raise your hand, because this work would not be possible without the team on the ground. When I first started in 2008 with Housing Works, that was almost 17 years ago, I was one of the first of 2 staff that later became 8 staff, that later became 22 staff, and today we're at nearly 60 staff. Our budget was also 1.5 million in 2015. And today we just had a finance committee call and we're at nearly 7 million. And from the first 75 people we served in 2000, as of 2008, today we're serving just under 900 people. And yeah. We have another nearly 400 that we're going to serve before January, because we have 2 properties that we will be partnering with developers on to lease up. And one of those buildings is going to be on the corner of Santa Monica and Vermont in Hollywood, in partnership with Little Tokyo Service Center. And that will be 184 units. And then in December, we will have another building that we will be leasing up in partnership with Works, Women Organizing Resource Knowledge and Services. And that will be 142 units in Hacienda Heights. So there's a lot of work to be done. We're going to be doing we're doing some massive hiring, as most agencies are today. And we've got a lot of work to do. We can't do this work without folks like yourself. I'll tell you, I am just thrilled to be here today. I love to be surrounded by elders. I also love when when the elders are interspersed in the room with an intergenerational group. I think that is important. It's necessary, and it's vital to humanity. Our elders, we cannot keep doing the day-to-day work that many of us have dedicated our lives to. We can't do it without your wisdom and without your support. So I always like to lift up the elders, because you are yesterday's children. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm here, I really, when I was thinking about like, what do I want to share with the group? And I think, I don't think it's necessary to really get into the nuts and bolts about the founding and everything about who we are as an organization is important. I think Sherry did it justice by saying, one of the things we do when new staff join us is we have a staff orientation that's about, is it 10 days long? 7 days long? And part of that is helping download information to staff to help them understand. I always tell them, you need to know what you signed up for, because you need to know who we are in our DNA as an organization, who we are in our genetics, because we are advocates, and we do it in a different way. And I like to believe we do it in a different way because of the leadership of Mary Kirchen, and then later Molly Lowry, even far back as Tom McGinnis, and our founding directors who came from the Immaculate Heart community. And I think the message that I'm going to share with you today, it's really simple. It's about community. Because so often we talk and hear about the many, many unhoused people that we see on the streets day in and day out. And what we hear is that housing is the answer. And my question to that, housing is vital. It is necessary, and we cannot do work that entails moving people along without them having a roof over their head. But I'm here to remind you that housing is just a first step to stability. There's much more that's entailed when we're doing the work that we're doing every day with our unhoused neighbors. So I want to start off with a story, because I love stories. And I'm sure that many of you have heard the story of the babies in the river. Have you? Who has heard about the stories of the babies in the river? It's always refreshing when not many people raise their hand. The babies in the river, there's different renditions. And the rendition that I will share with you has to do with 3 women walking alongside. They're on a hike on a beautiful Saturday morning. The sun's out, the air is crisp. They have their light sweaters, and they're just walking along the Kern River, having some really great conversation, shooting the breeze with one another. And, you know, if you've ever seen the Kern River, what do you think? Rapids and rough waters, right? But there's also some beauty to that. And so these women are walking along the river, enjoying their conversation, and they're just catching up with each other. We call them comadres. In my culture, a comadre is someone who will raise my children if I drop dead today. And so these comadres are walking along the river, and they're having a great conversation, when all of a sudden, at a distance, they hear a baby crying. And they're looking around, trying to figure out where is this baby crying? Where's it coming from? And the more they look, they just can't see it. And the water's running pretty quickly, when all of a sudden they see these little hands in the middle of the river, just saying, like, help me. The baby can't say help me, but it's crying. And one of the women just instinctively jumps in the river, swims across the currents, grabs the baby, swims back to the river bank. And one of the women is standing there saying, come on, come on, come on, bring the baby, bring the baby. And she gets the baby and she hands it to the other lady that's standing behind her. That lady starts warming up the baby. This woman is helping the other woman out of the river. And as they're trying to figure out what to do next, they hear another baby cry. And they look at each other and they're like, this kid's not crying. Is that what we think is happening? And sure enough, it's another baby coming down the river. And so the woman goes back in the river against the current, grabs the baby, swims back with the baby. The other woman grabs the little baby, gives her to the other comadre. So now she's got 2 babies, keeping them warm. And now this other woman's climbing out of the river, when again, guess what? Another baby is coming down the river. So she jumps back in, and this starts to happen now about 5, 6, almost 10 times. And the woman starts to get exhausted. So they switch up. Okay, you get some rest. Now the one that was drying off the babies, you're going to jump in the river and you're going to get the babies that are coming in. And they are doing a fantastic job. They are doing this, and it's like an assembly line. They are like on point, and they are not missing a beat. And they are saving and intercepting every baby that's coming across that river. And they are just like, yes, we're doing this. None of these babies are going to die. We got this. You're resting. I'm swimming. You're helping pull out. And then we're just going to switch up, and we're just going to keep doing this. when all of a sudden, one of the women, she just throws everything down and starts booking it up the riverbank. And the other two women look at her and say, well, where the hell are you going? And she looks back and she says, I'm getting ready to go find who's throwing these babies in the river. Right? We are doing great work every day. Sometimes we get lost in the repetitive motion of the day-to-day, every day, doing what I'm got to do. And it's just like moving, moving, moving. Our adrenaline is moving. I've been doing this 31 years, folks. My adrenaline has never stopped. And that goes for many of our frontliners who are here today, who experienced horror 7 days ago when 2 twins, 3-year-olds died in a building we served because their 22-year-old mother injected fentanyl into these children. Staff who walk in to people who have fallen and have been on the floor for maybe days at a time. The stories go on and on and on. The adrenaline never stops. So how do we work through that so that we don't get caught up with the babies in the river and get so entranced by the day-to-day, just doing what we know we do every day? How do we do that and also focus on the bigger picture is what we're trying to constantly ask ourselves. So I'm here to share whatever organically emerges. And I'm also here to share 7 principles that we try to live by at Housing Works. I forget, I have this. So we have 7 philosophical principles that we practice and which guide us, hi Michelle, which guide us as along the way as we're thinking about the work we're doing every day. So I want to ask a question before we go into the 7 principles is, how many of you know, so actually, when we're born, when we exit the womb, 70% of our brain is formed. Okay, so we come out the womb, 70% of our brain is already there. So that means the other 30% is forming in our formative years and all the way into our early 20s. And there's 3 basic things that every human being needs to at least have a shot at a healthy brain and a decent, potentially decent adulthood. Like what? There's 3 things we need. What could those 3 things be? Anyone? Shelter, nutrition, human contact, love. All you need is love. So yeah, we need a safe environment. We need nourishment. And we need love. Those 3 basic things. What do we think happens to a person who is born with 70% of their brain, like all of us, and then in their most formative years are missing 1, 2, or all 3 of those things? What happened? What could possibly become of that person? Or what could the odds be? You don't have to answer that, but I'm just asking you to think about that, right? It means when we think about cumulative advantage and disadvantage, like from a race equity perspective, when we're born into privilege and resources, we have cumulative advantage over people immediately because we're born into access to resource and privilege that we otherwise wouldn't have. So that gives us a foot in. But when we're at a disadvantage, where does that put us? So if we're missing love, if we're missing nourishment, that's healthy nourishment, right? Or a safe environment, that already puts folks behind the vantage point. Can we agree on that? Yeah. So I'm one that when I think about this 22-year-old mother who did this horrible thing to her children, I wonder, which of the three were you missing? If at all. Because for some people, you don't have to have missed any of those things, but something traumatic may have happened along the way that then put you at a disadvantage. And then we behave differently. And when you become an adult who maybe hasn't been equipped with the resources and the tools that you need to become a well-functioning adult like we want people to be in this society, and we hear the rhetoric right now on a larger level, I won't get into that one, but we tend to label, stigmatize, and ostracize folks because they don't fit in. Many of the people that we serve are the outliers. They're the folks who, in many instances, have a hard time fitting in. And so when we think about the work that we're doing, we think about our guiding, there's a lot of talk about the North Star or guiding light or whatever, but there's this compass, right? What's guiding us? We have 7 philosophical principles that are really basic. And I'm going to tell you one more story before we get into that. And that's the story about Rossetto. Have any of you heard a story about the Rossetto study in Pennsylvania? So in the 1960s, in a Pennsylvania town called Rossetto, an Italian-American community where extended families often lived together under one roof, researchers were interested in Rossetto because the heart disease rates were going down, and they were lower than anywhere in the surrounding area. So you have this Italian town, right? Maybe it was the wine. Who knows? It wasn't the bread. Olive oil, extra virgin olive oil, right? But there was this question in Rossetto. How is this community not really struggling with heart disease rates in the rampant numbers like many people in the surrounding areas are? So they looked at things like smoking, exercise, and diet, but they could not find an obvious cause for the reduced rates. All right, so they were stumped. Like, how is it that you're smoking, you're not exercising, and your diet is poor? How is it that the heart disease rates are as low as they are in this town? And in the 70s, residents of Rossetto started moving into single-family homes. Young people left town for college and the big city, just like I did. I left West Texas and came to LA in 1993, except the heart disease rates where I'm from are through the roof. But folks started in the 70s, folks started moving out and making their life elsewhere. And then so slowly the social fabric began to unravel and heart disease rates started to skyrocket. And it started to match the national average. Think about that. Until the 70s, when folks were staying put, Heart disease rates were down. The 70s come about, and all of a sudden people start leaving home, going to college, going to the city, going elsewhere, and not coming back. And all of a sudden things change and heart disease rates go up. What they found was that it wasn't the good habits that they may have had or special diets. What was really protecting their hearts for all those decades was connection. Human connection made the difference in the wellness of the people who were living in that town. Right? So let's get on to the principles. We have 7 philosophical and theoretical principles that we try to live by. First is that housing is a service. It's only a first response. Second is the social environment must be safe and healthy. Third is that as people who are interfacing on the front lines with the people we're serving, we must understand that we have to model positive behaviors because they're watching us, they're following our lead. And if I'm accompanying someone to the general relief office because they need some entitlement benefits, and I lose my cool with the person behind the glass window that I can't quite understand because you can hardly hear them, and it's just one of those situations where we're talking 2 different languages often, and not like literally, but just they speak DPSS, we speak homeless services, right? Just like property management, property managers and developers, their asset is the building. Our asset is the person, right? Modeling positive behaviors is important. We also practice unconditional positive regard, which means we understand that it's about the behavior, not the person. We look at the work we're doing through a non-judgmental, tolerant, and accessible approach. We believe in forgiveness. That's the key principle, if you ask me. And then finally, we know that our approach to the work that we do must be individualized, adaptive, and flexible. The question is, how do we do all of this when the contracts we serve don't support this approach? Right? Because I'll tell you, having been a nonprofit lifer doing this work as long as I've done it, I come from a time where we hand wrote progress notes, if we did progress notes at all. Because there wasn't, well, when you work for Molly Lowry, all of a sudden things just happen unconventionally because she just had it like that. Molly would tell the Department of Mental Health, no way, we're not gonna do your goldenrod billable papers because we got people to serve. And I used to tell Molly right before she passed, we would have these back and forth conversations, and I was told I was probably the only person on earth that could lean into Molly a little bit and tell her about herself. But I used to tell her, Molly, you're also an older white woman. Because when I step in after you, I'm not gonna get a pass like you've gotten. You're also nationally recognized, and she did amazing work. But Molly could move mountains in ways and push back in ways, because I can move mountains too. I think I've gotten there. I've moved a few mountains, not by myself. Molly could do it by herself. And she just had this thing, this way of people kind of doing whatever she wanted and needed. And I told her before she died, I said, I'm not gonna have it like that, Molly. I'm gonna have to earn my street cred because I'm a frontline worker moving into the executive director role with 0 executive experience and administrative experience. And people aren't gonna take me as seriously and credibly as they take you. And she would roll her eyes, Say, you're just too conservative. Mary, you were there when she. So, what does it mean when housing is a service and it's a first response? Well, first, we maintain that housing is a right and a service. It is a first inclusionary response. What it means is that having a home begins with the journey towards becoming an enfranchised member of the community, because home begins that journey. And we talked about the 3 basic needs when we exit the womb. We need love, we need a safe environment, and we need nourishment. Any questions or comments on that one? 2, the social environment has got to be safe and healthy. You know, my daughter, who's going to be 30 years old next week, I have a 30-year-old. When she was a very young child, she learned right away when she'd hear gunshots, she knew what the drill was. She's about 3 years old, 3, 4 years old. She also learned that you had to lock the door behind you. Otherwise, we might have people run through our house as they're running from other gangs or police or just folks, right? So when I look at my 30-year-old and I think about her formative years, and I think about the safety or lack thereof, it wasn't until I went to college and learned about the child and the child psychology and brain that I was like, oh my God, I have some reckoning to do here. But we made it through. The environment must be safe and reliable, predictable, empowering, and trusting. I mean, this is all basic stuff. I would hope it sounds basic to each of you, because it really is. These principles are not some magic formula. It's just really, I call it just getting back to basics. What does it take to do the beautiful art of human engagement that we do on a daily basis? How do we do that? And how do we practice that? So we also understand that we maintain that the environment has to be safe and healthy, while at the same time, there has to be the ability to thrive. We can only thrive when and it's possible when it is safe, predictable, trusting, empowering, and so on. Effective supportive housing teams are valued members of the community. Each of you, Alva, Duran, Mary Beth, Amy, Cynthia, Joanna, Karina, Mary Lou. We know that we can't do this work without each of you every single day. And so because they are valued members of the community, it's important that we work together to create vibrant communities and environments. And effective teams work together to move this along. What does it mean to model positive behaviors? Well, we maintain that our interactive processes with the people we're serving, especially when it comes to their behaviors, that creates a transformative, lasting force for not just the people we're serving, but for the staff, the people doing the serving. It's the spirit of reciprocity. Our behaviors are used as a reference point for tenants to measure the appropriateness of their own behavior. And guess what? We have got to remember that the way we behave is the way that the people we're serving or the people we're interfacing with we're influencing how people perceive us by the way we move through the world. Unconditional positive regard. Do I have any sociologists in here? The looking glass self theory. It's the behavior, not the person. What does it mean to really understand the heart of this? Well, any of us who are parents, first of all, can understand this. because our kids can do crummy things and say crummy things. And guess what? We're still stuck with them until they're 18. No, I, right? Because even after 18, it's even more complex. Remember, I have a 30-year-old. And it's about the behavior, not the person, the unconditional positive regard. We have got to know that folks are going to do and say things that are going to be, in some instances, horrifying. In some instances, not so horrifying, but pretty crummy. And we have got to be able to take a step back and remember that part of human behavior is that we will mess up and we will do things that we regret. And it matters when we can say to people, it's okay. I don't like what you did, but it doesn't mean I don't like you. And how often can we get caught up in social dynamics when we can't differentiate the behavior from the person? Because we're going to teach them. Do we? Is that the way to teach them? I don't believe so. So the focus is on the harmful and disruptive behavior while communicating that we value each other. That is something that's so simple, but yet, I've learned over and over and over again that with the people we serve, when they're doing things that disrupt the environment, that hurt people's feelings, that hurt people, we have to find a way to look within and understand if we cannot get out of our own way by understanding this person is still a valued person of the community, then we can actually cause some harm if we can't differentiate that. It's harm inducing rather than harm reducing. We also know that being non-judgmental, tolerant, and accessible is key in the work we do. We understand that social forces such as race, class, gender, stigma of mental illness, all of that plays into the way the people we serve behave. All of it. Supportive housing team members understand that they have got to be tolerant, non-judgmental, and skilled in building a fully accessible, inclusive community and housing environment. That's not very easy to do sometimes, is it? When we're working in communities with folks who maybe experienced trauma at a very, very young age in their life, and we're missing maybe all three of those essential elements, all of a sudden, sometimes we might find ourselves working with someone who, you ever seen that meme where a little kid keeps bumping into the wall because they have a bucket over their head? Yeah, that's what that reminds me of, is that sometimes we, as the person serving the person who has the bucket over their head, we want to help them find a way to take that bucket off their head so they can get out of their own way. We also understand that integration versus inclusivity within a housing setting, which is an integrated setting, is where tenants with disabilities and special needs live alongside people who also have disabilities and special needs. Inclusion is the actual merging of specialized resources and non-special needs with the belief that all people are different and that all people will learn differently and should have full access to the same resources. But we know for a fact that doesn't happen. I was telling a coworker the other day when we were driving to City Hall, we drove down the 110 freeway, and we drove by what used to be Pacific Alliance Hospital, right? The French hospital is what it used to be called. My son was born at the French hospital, Pacific Alliance, because during that time I had Medi-Cal. And when my daughter was born, the 30-year-old, I had insurance. And so I had her at Glendale Adventist. So I learned firsthand the difference in services very early in my age, the difference between having private insurance that I pay for through my job versus having Medi-Cal. And I could tell you long stories about what that was like. But so you may have access to the same resources, but my question is it the same? Quality of it is likely not. We maintain that the supportive housing team members practice being non-judgmental, tolerant, and accessible. Any questions, comments so far? Forgiveness. Let's come back to that one, because that needs to be the last one. It's like the mother of all principles. So we also understand being an individualized, adaptive, and flexible in the work we do. And sometimes our staff can struggle with that because we have requirements, contractual requirements that say we've got to do things, and they give us the formula and they say, this is what you got to do, just replicate it with the people on your caseload and do this 5x5 and this blah, 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 blah. And yet it's really hard to meet the needs of the people we're serving when we can't quite tailor it freely in a way that is actually conducive to the people we're serving. So we have to understand that supportive housing services, the team, and the agency bureaucracies, that's my favorite, need to be flexible and adaptive. But so often the systems, oh gosh, a few years ago, I coined a term that I say, like compassion fatigue. We all know what compassion fatigue is. Well, after navigating systems over and over and feeling like I had that bucket on my head as a case manager, because I was navigating a bureaucratic system of just all kinds of windy roads, we can get into a place of following along and saying, well, I'm going to be one of the good students and I'm going to do that. Or I'm going to look for the loopholes to figure out how I can make this easier and less fatiguing. So I came up with the term industrialized induced fatigue. Because imagine this, imagine being in a car with someone that you're taking to a mental health appointment, and this person has been off their psych meds for maybe a year. You know those folks, Anthony. And you've got them in the car. They're reeling. They're actively having a conversation, and it's not with you. It is not with you, but it might be about you, right? And so you're dealing with traffic. You got this person next to you that you're just not sure what's getting ready to happen next. And then you're trying to get them to their appointment. Oh, let me paint it even better. You know those folks we see on the corner who are like all over the place talking to themselves and doing karate chops and everything that we know we see out there with the hardest to serve? Those are the individuals that Department of Mental Health has the hardest time to serve. You know why? because they can't bill for services to do the engagement piece. So when they don't fit into that bureaucratic box, they're just going to flounder out there. But all of a sudden, you get one of our street outreach workers like Duran Whitaker here, who will go out there and do his magic with his art of human engagement, convince someone to go with you to the Department of Mental Health to be seen as a walk-in, because if I try to get an appointment for you, it's not going to be for 6 months down the road. And then you'll have to wait another 3 months to get them on meds. So that's 9 months. But if I take you in at 6 o'clock in the morning, and I'm one of the first 5 people there to be seen, then you might have some luck. And then you're done with that. They get seen, they get started through the system, but now as the worker, you got to go and find 4 more of those individuals. That's exhausting. Absolutely exhausting. So those bureaucratic processes, they're so rigid and unwilling to bend and flex that so often we have to find and create the tricks to the trade to find the adaptability and flexibility in there. We also know that being able to do this means that we maintain that forgiveness with a willingness to try again is actually a good thing, because it can move us through success. You know, how many times did our parents have issues with us when they were trying to get us to close the door that leads to the kitchen because flies will come in? I can't get my household to follow that rule. And then I lose a gasket and they're like, oh, we'll close the door now. I'm like, I don't want flies in my kitchen. But then all of a sudden, one day they get it. And it's like, it only took 25 million times. Success is the foundation on which we help our participants rebuild a constructive life full of purpose and meaning. Forgiveness. Every single one of us in this room knows about forgiveness. I hope. But if I had to bet money, I'd win. The willingness to try again and give success a chance is so critical. We must focus on the assets that the person brings so that we can move them along. Every single person, even the one who gives us the biggest headache or the biggest heartache or what have you, there's something in them, as Molly used to say, there's a little light flickering that sometimes is going dim, dangerously dim in some instances. And then all of a sudden, what reignites it? You blow. Just a little wind, just a little air. And what happens to the flame? It expands. All of a sudden, it reignites. We have to think about that in human engagement. When we see that folks are constantly feeling like they can't do nothing right, they're always on my case, I can't get this right. We have to switch it around and think about, what do you bring to the table that I can build off of so that you feel good about yourself, and then we get some buy-in. We also maintain that support for the people we serving must be individualized, and that the agency, Housing Works in this case, that our systems must be willing to bend and flex. And I'll tell you, I'm going to lift up someone who's in here right now. And these folks don't often get lifted up. And that is our fiscal director here, Karina Martinez. Raise your hand. Who, by the way, is an alum of Immaculate Heart High School. And all you have to do is look at her penmanship to know that. Firsthand, because she's amazing. Karina's our fiscal director. And I'll tell you, I've never worked with someone in the fiscal department. I mean, I never did before Housing Works anyways, because I was a frontline worker. All right. But when I was a frontline worker, there were times, this was a lesson I taught Molly many years ago before Housing Works. She asked us to come in to work on Saturdays. And all of a sudden we got this memo saying, okay, frontliners, you're going to rotate and come in on Saturdays. And one Saturday a month, you're going to come in and you're going to take folks to Target and then Hometown Buffet. And then you're going to do like all these little outings. And then you're going to end the day with a movie. Okay, easy enough, right? Yeah. Well, we do that. But then she pulled me in one day, had to be around 1999, 2000. And she said, I'm getting reports that you're not going into the theater with people. And I said, yeah, that's right. She says, well, you're supposed to be with them. I said, well, I can't afford it. I have 2 kids. I don't have a car. I'm on the bus to get to work. You're asking me to front some money? So it's either between Hometown Buffet, if I even eat that, or the movies, because I'm not buying anything at Target, because back then I couldn't even afford to buy anything at Target. So I was like, I can't afford. I'm watching them eat, and I'm sitting in the van till the movie's over. And the light bulb went off for her because she didn't realize all the things she didn't know. Something that simple. And I lift up Karina because this woman here, one of the things that she and staff can attest to this, they will never front money on their own and have to wait for the next payroll to generate to get reimbursed. Never. And that's just a little example of how agencies need to think about. So often as leaders, we don't realize when we haven't had to struggle in those ways, if we don't understand who our staff are and they're my coworkers. They're not my staff. They are my coworkers. And if we don't understand what staff go home to, I question our role in leadership. And it's the same for the people we're serving. We've got to understand what's going on with them. They think sometimes it's cheaper for them to buy canned food at a corner store. Is it cheaper to buy canned food in a corner store? We know it's not, and it's likely going to be expired. So sometimes we've got to help folks understand, just because you're eating every day and it appears that you're eating doesn't mean that you actually are doing things in a way that are helpful to yourself. The agency bureaucracies, we have got to look at internally and figure out what are we implementing every single day, policies, procedures, all of this, because it's important for us to think about. So just to recap, the 7 philosophical principles. Any questions, comments, something? 1 o'clock. Oh, I did good. Michelle, where are you?
Hi, Celina.
Hi, Arnali.
That was such a lovely talk and just spoke to our hearts. And I've known Celina for, actually, I knew you when you first got into your ED role a long time ago. And I can just attest, like, your leadership is so true and authentic. I still remember trying to work, and I used to work with her when I was at Saban Community Clinic, and something that you said rang true to me was we were trying to partner on a contract, and I remembered your case managers advocating for higher than everyone else. And I just remember thinking, and you said to me, like, they have to get paid more. And I realized that I had fallen into this agency bureaucracy of like, oh, this is what people are going to have to get paid. And now, as the ED of Hollywood Food Coalition, I'm in a conversation with a group of new leaders who are basically thinking about compensation and say, how do we make sure that we raise up so that the workforce can continue to do the extremely hard work that they're doing and get paid to do that. And I just want to give you kudos for planting that idea in my head and really like continuing to have me think about that. So thank you.
Thank you, Arnali. Hi, Judy.
I have two questions, but I know I can monopolize. I'll ask one at a time and wait for someone else to ask. But going back to the story of the babies in the river and going up to find out who's tossing the babies in the river, or why are they falling in the river, or how did they get in the river?
Yeah.
Okay, so in what's happening with the unhoused among us, which comadre is going up to the river to where the Supreme Court decided that people cannot sleep outdoors, and how can that be rectified?
That's right. Yes. We all need to go and infiltrate. Yeah. Yeah. Well, right now it's a really, I mean, it's happening on a few levels. There's a lot of advocacy happening. And in fact, you know, I'm going to be part of that effort just because recently I was selected to be part of a regional leadership table in LA County. The Conrad and Hilton Foundation selected 8 leaders in homeless services who have on the ground experience. And we will be recommending policy, not only locally, but we're also talking like what needs to happen as a result of things happening on a national level. There's advocacy groups through like the National Alliance to End Homelessness, the Corporation for Supportive Housing. We've got our friends over at the Economic Roundtable who are constantly speaking truth. The Economic Roundtable folks. Mary, do you have any other do what? Or just thoughts about what Rosa is asking?
Celina's voice is being heard, and it's being heard because not only because of the 7 principles, but because there's no compromise. We do not compromise on the way we do the work. And if we have to sit at the table and tell people who we are over and over and over again, that's where part of the advocacy comes in. And that's where the Hilton Foundation recognized your leadership. And that's where people like Judy Vaughn and others who are in this room speak up, speak out, don't give in, and basically push back so that ultimately what you talked about in the beginning is the formation of community is actually what happens. So more specifically, Rosa, it's being at the table and finding access to being at the table.
So then what I'm asking is, with the Immaculate Heart of Pray, Educate, and Act, those of us that are here, what can we do to support what you're doing? What can we do to act? How can we get access, for instance, to the list of those groups that you're talking about that we might be able to support? So we're walking out of here with something to do.
Right.
And yes, to say this is wonderful work. And we need to be part of it. What is the part of it that we need to be doing apart from applauding?
Yeah. I think there's to do systems level work, it takes time and effort. And one of the things that I'm really grateful for is right now we have done some organizational restructuring so that I could do some higher level systems work. And this is an area where we're talking, Rosa, about what could it look like organizationally if we brought in a policy person to help work alongside me so that we could mobilize groups like the Immaculate Heart community and groups at the Gibord Center as we're having conversations and Alexandria House and just working collectively, because we can't do it alone. It has to be collective. And so we need to up our game at Housing Works about how we mobilize communities to be more proactive in what we're doing on a national level in terms of advocacy and speaking up. So I appreciate you asking that question. I don't have any immediate answers for you at the moment, other than it is something that's hot on our mind, because we know that we have got to, you know, it took us a couple years after Molly passed, to get in the street cred game in the sector, and we're there now. I can fully confidently say that Housing Works is again, we hadn't lost it, but we had kind of like that, we were just kind of getting lost in the weeds a little bit because we were looking at all of the babies in the river that we needed to pull out. And so now we're taking a step back and we're looking at the bigger picture so that we can come back to the Immaculate Heart community, for instance, and say, okay, Rosa, I need you to organize a group of folks because we need letters sent to council member so-and-so, or we need letters and phone calls sent out to Washington to this congressperson. Yes.
Thank you so much, Celina, for all the work that you do and your presentation today. I just also wanted to mention a couple of resources. One is, I'm going to say it, the Poor People's Campaign.
Oh, that's right.
And also CAST. K-Buck was here at our last Lunch and Learn, and they have a policy page that has lots of action possibilities along with everything else that you mentioned. But my question is, I wanted to go to the we have to model positive behavior.
Mhm.
And I wanted you to speak a little bit more on that because you mentioned going to the DCFS office, and it is nothing but a source of frustration and anger. And women also often have been put down for their anger. And when people feel safe and feel supported and are encouraged to find their voice and speak out, not find their voice, but be able to use it without risk of repercussions that are unimaginable. Like, how do you define what is positive behavior when maybe the normative would be checking things off that is not?
Yeah, thank you. That's a good one. The first thing that comes to mind as you're asking that is, I have an undergrad in social work. And one of the assignments that I really enjoyed doing in undergrad in social work school was a process recording. Does that sound familiar to anyone? Because a process recording, we were assigned to write a paper based on an interaction that we had with someone we were serving. And the assignment was to write down literally everything that's going on in our head that we're not saying. Imagine what was on that paper. Because if we really got honest about some of the things that go through our head as we're navigating all of this, right? I say this because the process recording exercise, it really helped me, and it continues to just like stick with me, because it really helped me to remember, like, man, if I can't control what's happening up here for me, because if that inner gangster in me wants to come out and just kind of like take a walk, that is not going to serve. That's not the right way to handle conflict. It's not the right way to handle getting something you need done. The louder I yell, it's not going to help. The louder I bang my fist on a table, that's not going to help. So it's a matter of really, like, that's where that inner inner voice, inner ethics, inner values. Just really, we have to get to a place of understanding when we're getting to that place. Because I know, and I'm told this all the time, Celina, you are way more tolerant of stuff that some folks don't have they have a quicker fuse for. I have a longer, deeper bandwidth when it comes to crummy behavior, because I'm not really going to lose sleep over it because you're doing some crummy stuff. Maybe sometimes I will, but I work really hard to try to not go there. So it's that self-awareness and as an agency being mindful, and I hope our staff experience this, is that if you're experiencing something or you are getting to a place of agitation in systems navigation and trying to model conflict resolution, for instance, in a way that is helpful, but you're really struggling with making sure you don't get fired because you're on the verge, on the cusp of saying something or doing something. You know, I've heard staff over the years say, I'm just waiting for him to put his hand on me and I'm just going to fire at him and I'm going to lose my job. No, come on, let's go take a walk, because we're not going to do that here. I've had staff over the years say, well, I'm going to start carrying my knife with me when I go to that encampment. And if someone threatens me, I'm going to show them. We need to pay attention to that. We want staff to talk about it because we need to know when you're feeling that way. But what we need to do is close that gap so we can help staff recognize when it's happening so they can tap out and have someone else come in and take it for them. Because we were not always going to model positive behaviors. I'm guilty of it. I lose my cool. Oh, I lose my cool. But it's not as frequently anymore. Yeah, yes. Yes.
I'm new to this organization, so could you please tell me what areas you service and what areas are you looking to service?
Right. So we are as far west as Winnetka in the valley. We are as far east as El Monte. We are as far south as Rancho Dominguez, which is in Compton, right across the street from Roy Campanella Park. And then we serve West Hollywood, Eagle Rock, Pasadena, like all the areas in between. We don't serve the South Bay. We don't go, we're now on the border of the Florence Firestone district, which is further out for us than we had originally said we would be. Because see, it's real important for us to have a catchment area that is manageable for us. Because when we start growing and we're starting to serve areas that we don't frequent, we're not going to do a real great service to the people we're serving, much less to the communities we're serving. And that to me is really hand in hand. We have got to do right by the people we're serving, by the people doing the serving, and by the communities that are also being served. And so in that area that I just outlined, we're serving people living in single site settings, which are developments, buildings that are designed for people who are either low income, because typically sometimes it's a mixed use property where there's low income folks that are not coming from homelessness, along with folks who are coming from being unhoused with a special need. And then we also serve people living in what we call scattered site. And these are folks who have a Section 8 voucher in hand, finding a landlord in the community that accepts Section 8 and living next door to us in some instances. So, Mary?
Good. I know there's a program that's beginning in the fall, and to speak to the advocacy work that Housing Works does in thinking outside of the box and flexibility and all of that in order to address system change, if you could just talk about the program that you developed.
Thank you. Yes, I'm very excited. This is actually what I'm doing up here with this little mic that I don't have to hold. I'm going to be teaching at Santa Monica College in the spring. In 2019, around 2018, I started having conversations alongside a colleague who works at LA Homeless Services Authority at LASA. Her name is Vanessa Rios. She is the senior workforce development person over at LASA. Before LASA, she was at the Corporation for Supportive Housing. We were both frontline workers. She's younger than me, and she's been in the work since she was 18. Just like I have. So we shared a lot of commonalities. And so one of the things that we have done over the years, when I became the executive director, I started doing a lot of advocacy on behalf of frontline workers, having been a frontline worker myself and understanding all the things I didn't know. Vanessa Rios and I were approached by Santa Monica College after some efforts from one of the board of trustees, Nancy Greenstein, Dr. Nancy Greenstein at Santa Monica College, and Meredith Berkson, who was at LASA. Those were the first two individuals we spoke to. Actually, Meredith introduced us to Nancy because she thought we were onto something when we were talking about the lack of training and support that frontline workers were receiving even back then. And we knew that there was getting ready to be this slippery slope that was going to get worse if we didn't start to prepare the next generation of workers. Because we get so caught up in this work, getting caught up in thinking we're going to end homelessness in the next 5 years. And we're going to end it in the next 5 years. And then 5 years passes and we're going to end it again in the next 5 years. And well, here we are all these years later, and it's growing. So one of the things we started thinking about was, as we're aging out, retiring, for those who have the privilege of retiring, because when you work in nonprofit, you don't have a pension. So you start thinking about what's going to happen to this new wave of workers coming into this field. And once us who are the veterans or the elders move along, die, retire, whatever happens to us, our wisdom is not going to have been harnessed in the way that it needed to. So long story short, Santa Monica College heard us, and they hired us, the both of us, as adjunct faculty to design a curriculum for frontline workers in homeless services. And this August, we will be launching the very first cohort of 25 people. Actually, it'll be 28 people. And it's a 9-month course. College credits are earned, and it's transferable to a Cal State. And I'm really proud of this curriculum because just last night I was reviewing the draft that we're looking at for the syllabus. And I was just like, it hit me. I said, dang, we did a good job. Because we included things in there that I've never seen taught before or trained on before. And I'm excited for what's going to come with that, because it's going to be an opportunity for us to do things in a way that's never been done. This is the first in the state of California. The idea is that after the first cohort completes its course, then the idea is to replicate it amongst the 19 community colleges throughout LA.
Hi, so I work at the Cecil, and it's a very cloistered environment, very compact, very full. And the biggest problem that we've been having is, where do we start building community?
Mm-hmm.
And this may not be a question you can answer in 7 minutes,
Yeah.
but I'm just trying to get ideas. We had a great conversation at the table. I'm just trying to get ideas on how to where I work it's a much different environment. It's
Mhm.
everything is, there's no space, there's very little community space. So how do we build this sense of community with no space and a lot of unchecked mental health issues?
Mhm. One person, one life, one relationship at a time. When it becomes a trickle effect. We know at Housing Works that enrichment services and arts and wellness efforts is one way to build community, even with communities that are really complex and just not set up in such a way that are easy to do that. I mean, I worked in Skid Row. I used to go pay people's rent and negotiate with drug dealers at the Cecil Hotel. Because I was the one that used to get sent out to go deal with the drug dealers to tell them, stop giving people credit after this date because we're their payee and you will not get paid any more credit if you front them any drugs after this. And so when we were on 5th and Crocker, and that was the interim facility, the village, Lamp Village, which is now the People Concern. So we had the Lamp Village on 5th and Crocker. We had the Day Center on 6th and San Julian. And then we had the Lamp Lodge on 7th and Gladys, or 7th and Stanford, basically. And that was a really challenging environment to build community. So what we did was we created little cohorts of people that we were figuring out, okay, who are the folks that refuse to take a bath, that need to take a bath? And how do we tell them, how do we get them moving along to take a bath? And this is community building. I promise you, I'm getting to it. But, one of the things we would do is like, all right, again, Miss Molly would assign me and say, these 5 men need to take a bath every week. I don't care what you got to do to make it happen. And they were like my grandpas. How do you tell grandpa that he needs to take a bath? Well, I said to the guys, do you guys know how to swim? They're like, yeah. You want to go swimming? And you know what they said to me? As long as you put on a bathing suit. So guess what? I put on a bathing suit. And we'd show up to the Echo Park indoor pool, and those poor lifeguards would look at us and be like, but all of a sudden I had a swimming group. And then other people, one of the things we would do is when there was conflict with folks at Lamp Lodge living independently and neighbors were fighting and talking about each other. Okay, let's get together with the folks who are having conflict, and let's get our skilled case managers, our most skilled case managers, and let's take all of those folks camping so they're out in the wilderness with us for 3 days. They don't have anywhere to run to, and we're gonna have to deal with conflict. Before you knew it, they became friends. They squashed whatever conflict they had going on. And yeah, so that's a short answer, somewhat short. All right. Thank you.
Celina, thank you for that. Really, so many of those points, they seem so obvious, but to hear you articulate them in that way just really resonated with me, and I saw lots of heads nodding. And thank you for leading in your crew, everybody who is really committed to doing the work. One thing I say is when people talk about affordable housing, I say, oh, there's a lot of affordable housing going up. It's all the encampments, because you don't see one tent here and one tent here, but people come together, and that community that is so important to all of us is reflected in that. So thank you for the education piece for me and for sharing your wisdom with us all. I want to thank you all for being here and remind you, if you would like to come to our film festival tomorrow, we do have passes. We'll sign you up. We're having a special screening. It's tomorrow at noon down at LA Live, but we have passes so you can go to the rest of the film festival if you like short film festivals. The theme is social justice, so you might find it very interesting. And again, I want to thank you all for coming. Please sign up, fill out the survey, come to our next Lunch and Learn. And also there's information about the Cultural Humility retreat that's going to happen on August 1st at the Peace Awareness Labyrinth in West Adams. Thank you all. Thank you. Bye-bye.